Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we'll be delving into the life and legacy of Selim.
A fascinating figure.
Absolutely, a ruler who, despite a short 8-year reign,
Really made an impact.
exactly, left a huge mark on the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And to guide us through all of this, we'll be using excerpts from his Wikipedia page.
It's amazing what he crammed into such a short time.
Yeah, like he knew he didn't have long and was in a hurry.
A real go-getter.
So where do we even begin with a guy like this?
Wow.
Let's start at the beginning, I guess.
Sure.
Selim was born in 1470.
The son of Bayezid II.
Right. Not exactly born to be a nobody.
No, definitely not.
But the Wikipedia page really emphasizes his time as governor of Trabzon.
Oh, absolutely. A crucial period for him.
And if I remember my Ottoman geography correctly, that's right on the Black Sea coast.
You got it. Right on the frontier.
So he was dealing with all kinds of stuff right from the start,
All kinds of challenges.
like a trial by fire.
Exactly. Facing the Safavids to the east.
Oh, right, them.
Yeah. And dealing with the constant threat of conflict in the region.
So these early experiences really shaped him.
Absolutely. He led campaigns against the Safavids.
Wow.
Conducted slave raids in the Caucasus.
Against Georgia.
That's right. And through all of this, he learned the art of war firsthand.
No substitute for real-world experience, I guess.
Especially back then, it forged him into the ambitious ruler he'd become.
And his Wikipedia entry even mentions he ordered a massacre of Anatolian Shiites before the Battle of Chaldiran.
Sadly, yes.
He really wasn't messing around.
He saw them as potential allies of the Safavids who were Shia themselves.
Right, forgot about that.
And he wanted to eliminate any possible internal threat before going to war.
Makes sense from a purely strategic point of view.
Chilling, but effective.
Then, of course, there's the whole rebellion against his own father.
Oh, yeah, I can't forget that.
Talk about family drama.
Unprecedented in Ottoman history.
That's what the source says.
Just think about it. Openly challenging the reigning sultan, his own father.
It takes guts.
And ambition. A ton of it.
Well, it worked. He seized the throne in 1512.
Yeah, and he didn't hesitate to solidify his power.
How so?
Let's just say his brothers and nephews didn't exactly send him thank you notes.
That bad, huh?
He understood any weakness could be exploited.
So he ruled with an iron fist.
It created a climate of fear, no doubt.
But it also ensured stability, right?
That's the argument. Stability in a time of great turmoil.
There's even a story about his nephew, Shahzadi Murad.
Yeah, poor guy.
He had to flee to the Safavid Empire for safety.
To escape Selim's wrath.
Can you imagine the fear in the palace?
I bet it was palpable.
Okay, so we've got a picture of this ambitious, ruthless, maybe even terrifying ruler.
He was definitely not a ruler to be messed with.
But what were his goals? What was he trying to achieve?
His sights were set eastward.
Toward the Safavids.
Exactly. He saw them as a major threat, politically and religiously.
Right, he was a devout Sunni Muslim.
And the Safavids were Shia.
So a major religious divide.
Combined with the Safavids' growing power, they became his primary target.
So all roads led to the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514.
Inevitably, yes.
A major clash of empires.
It really was a turning point in the region's history.
What led to the Ottoman victory? Sheer numbers.
Well, they did have a larger army,
Right.
but their victory was also due to superior technology.
Like what?
They had effectively integrated gunpowder weapons.
Cannons and muskets.
Precisely. While the Safavids still relied heavily on traditional cavalry tactics.
Outdated, I guess.
For that kind of battle, certainly.
So it was like bringing a gun to a knife fight.
In a way, yes. The Ottomans decimated the Safavid ranks.
Sounds pretty decisive.
It was. It marked the beginning of Ottoman dominance in the region.
Wow, a real turning point.
Absolutely. And it set the stage for his future conquests.
But before we get to those, I gotta ask.
What's that?
About this exchange of letters with Shah Ismail before the battle.
Oh, yeah, it's a great story.
Like a historical trash-talking session.
You could say that.
So what did they say?
In his letter, Selim basically taunted Ismail,
Like what?
saying real rulers should face danger head-on.
Implying Ismail was a coward.
Exactly.
Ooh, burn.
But get this, Ismail responded by sending Selim a box of opium,
What?
suggesting Selim was high when he wrote the letter.
Oh, snap. That's cold.
Selim was furious, and he had the envoy who delivered the opium put to death.
Yikes.
It escalated quickly.
Understatement of the year.
But this wasn't just about personal insults, you know.
So there were deeper strategic motives at play.
Absolutely. Selim also wanted to cripple the Safavid economy.
How so?
He imposed a strict silk embargo.
Even though the Ottomans relied on Persian silk for their own industry.
That's right, it was a risky move.
A gamble.
You could say that. He was determined to break the Safavids.
So it reveals this kind of dependence on the enemy.
Exactly. The Ottomans had a thriving textile industry.
But they needed that raw silk.
They did, and it put them in a vulnerable position.
Selim's embargo was a bold attempt to break free from that.
But his son, Suleiman, reversed it shortly after taking the throne.
Interesting.
Seems he had a different approach.
A deep dive for another day, perhaps.
For sure.
But back to Selim. Did he keep pushing east after Chaldron?
He did, but not right away.
Where did he turn his attention?
Southward, toward the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt.
Ah, right, the Mamluks.
They controlled Egypt and key trade routes.
And they had a formidable military reputation, right?
They did. Those Mamluk slave soldiers were a force to be reckoned with.
But Selim wasn't intimidated.
And not in the slightest.
So how did he approach this new challenge?
With his trademark speed and ruthlessness.
Oh boy, here we go again.
First, he moved against them in 1516 at the Battle of Marj Dabik.
Marj Dabik, let me see, that's in Syria, right?
That's right.
He went straight into the heart of their territory.
No messing around.
What happened?
Another decisive Ottoman victory.
No way, they crushed the Mamluks again.
Your sultan was killed.
Oh, wow.
And Selim marched into Syria practically unopposed.
Like a hot knife through butter.
But the Mamluks weren't finished.
Oh. They came back for more.
They regrouped and made a final stand in 1517.
Where?
At the Battle of Ridani, near Cairo.
So they basically had their backs against the wall.
They did, but once again, Selim's army proved too strong.
Especially that artillery, right?
It was a decisive factor.
So 2 battles, and the entire Mamluk Sultanate was absorbed into the Ottoman Empire.
Just like that.
Amazing. What was the significance of this? Was it just about territory?
Well, it did add a vast territory to the empire, but it also gave them something more valuable.
More valuable than land.
The holy cities of Mecca and Medina.
Whoa. The holiest sites in Islam under Ottoman control.
Talk about a power move.
Did he declare himself caliph then?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Selim was smart enough to understand the optics of it all.
So he didn't want to rock the boat too much.
Exactly. Instead of caliph, he took a more humble title.
Which was?
Qadim al-Haramain, servant of the 2 holy cities.
So a strategic choice to avoid alienating other Muslim leaders.
Exactly. He presented himself as a protector, not a usurper.
A clever move.
There's this later story about the Abbasid caliph transferring the caliphate to him.
Oh, right.
But historians now believe it's fabricated.
A historical myth.
You could say that.
But even without the title, controlling Mecca and Medina gave him immense religious authority.
No doubt about it. It enhanced the Ottoman Sultan's prestige throughout the Muslim world.
And paved the way for the Ottomans to become a major force on the world stage.
You could say that.
So we've seen how Selim transformed the empire through conquest.
A military mastermind.
But what about his personality, his relationships? He was known as Selim the Grim, right?
That's the nickname, and we'll explore that in more detail after a quick break.
Sounds intriguing, can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
So Selim the Grim.
Quite a nickname.
It is. Was he really that scary?
Well, the nickname definitely suggests a certain, shall we say, decisiveness.
And there were plenty of stories to back that up.
All right. Oh, yeah. He wasn't afraid to eliminate anyone he saw as a threat.
Even his own family, as we've discussed.
Exactly, and it wasn't limited to just family.
The Wikipedia page mentions he executed several of his viziers.
That's right. Not exactly a stable career path.
Can you imagine working for this guy?
Yeah.
Talk about high pressure.
I know, right? There's a story about one of his viziers.
Oh, tell.
Knowing how Selim tended to, well, let go of his advisors.
Let's just say, not gently.
Right. This vizier jokingly asked for a little heads up before his execution.
So he could prepare.
Exactly. Get his affairs in order.
Did Selim find it funny?
Apparently, he laughed and said he'd be happy to oblige.
Oh, no.
But only if he had a suitable replacement lined up.
That's both hilarious and terrifying.
A perfect encapsulation of Selim's personality.
It really gives you a sense of the atmosphere in his court.
Walking on eggshells constantly.
But we have to remember, this was a dangerous time, right?
Absolutely. Constant threats, internal and external.
So maybe his ruthlessness was, in a way, necessary.
He felt it was to maintain stability, to secure the empire's future.
A product of his time, perhaps.
I think that's a fair assessment.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom, was it?
No, not at all.
This same Wikipedia page mentions he was a patron of the arts and sciences.
That's right. He had a more refined side as well.
And a talented poet himself.
Writing under the pen name Mala Salimi.
Selim the Grim, the poet. Who knew?
It's an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it? The warrior sultan composing verses.
What kind of poetry do you think he wrote?
It's hard to say, but I imagine it reflected his many facets.
The warrior, the ruler, maybe even the philosopher.
Perhaps. It's fascinating to think about.
I would love to read some of his work.
Me too. It would provide a unique window into his mind.
Speaking of his intellectual side, the source mentions his admiration for Alexander the Great.
Ah, yes. A classic role model for ambitious rulers.
He even compared himself to Alexander and Shah Ismail to Darius.
A very deliberate comparison, I'd say.
What do you make of it?
Well, Alexander was the ultimate conqueror, a symbol of military genius.
So Selim was aligning himself with that image.
Exactly, signaling his own aspirations for the empire.
And by casting Shah Ismail as Darius, the defeated Persian king,
He was essentially predicting his own victory at Chaldiran.
framing the narrative, both for his troops and for history.
He understood the power of symbolism.
A master strategist on and off the battlefield.
Absolutely, and that leads us to his legacy.
How did his reign set the stage for the Ottoman Golden Age under Suleiman?
Well, for one, his conquests, however brutal, significantly expanded the empire.
Giving Suleiman a much larger and richer territory to rule.
Exactly. He inherited an Ottoman superpower thanks to his father.
But it wasn't just about territory, was it?
No, Selim also reformed the military, making it even more powerful.
So he wasn't just conquering, he was building too.
Precisely. He streamlined the bureaucracy, centralized power.
Laying the groundwork for long-term stability and success.
Exactly. It allowed Suleiman to focus on further expansion, on cultural development.
On solidifying the empire's position as a world power.
It's like Selim built the foundation and Suleiman built the palace.
A perfect analogy, but sadly Selim's reign and his life were cut short.
He died in 1520, only 49 years old.
That young. What happened?
The official cause was a mistreated carbuncle.
A skin infection. That's it.
It can be serious if not treated properly.
But there are other theories, right?
There are whispers of cancer, even poisoning.
So, a bit of a mystery.
It adds to the intrigue, for sure.
Makes you wonder what else he might have accomplished if he'd lived longer.
We can only speculate.
But he was brought back to Istanbul for a grand burial, right?
He was. His son Suleiman commissioned a magnificent mosque in his honor.
The Yavuz Selim Mosque.
The very same. It still stands today, a testament to his power.
A fitting tribute, I suppose, to a ruler who reshaped the empire.
And even in death, there's a twist.
What's that?
His death coincided with a plague outbreak.
A plague. Like the Black Death.
Not exactly the same plague, but a serious epidemic nonetheless.
Wow.
Some historians think Selim might have contracted the disease.
Which would explain his sudden death.
It's a possibility.
The conqueror of empires, brought down by an invisible enemy.
A reminder that even the most powerful are subject to fate.
And that disease has shaped history in ways we often don't realize.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, from Selim's rise to his, well, rather abrupt end.
It's been quite a journey.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious about his foreign relations.
Beyond the Safavids and the Mamluks,
Yeah, were there any other notable interactions?
well, there's his relationship with Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire.
In India.
That's right, and it wasn't always smooth sailing between them.
How so?
Initially, Selim supported Babur's rival, Ubaidullah Khan,
Okay.
but later they reconciled. Selim even sent military experts to help Babur.
So a strategic shift in alliances.
You could say that Selim was a pragmatist when it came to foreign policy,
He was willing to adapt if it benefited the empire?
and this alliance had long-term implications for Ottoman-Mughal relations.
It's amazing to see how these rulers were playing this global game of chess.
It truly is a complex web of alliances and rivalries.
But I think it's time for us to start drawing some conclusions from this deep dive into Selim.
I agree. What are your thoughts?
Well, he was a transformative figure, no doubt.
Absolutely.
His reign was short, but packed with action, expansion, but also a lot of bloodshed.
He was a man of contradictions, that's for sure.
A brilliant military mind, a ruthless ruler, a patron of the arts. How should we remember him?
It's the question that lingers, isn't it? Hero or villain?
Yeah.
Visionary or tyrant?
I don't think there's an easy answer.
There isn't. He was a product of his time, a time of constant warfare.
So we have to try to understand him within that context.
Exactly. His actions, while brutal by today's standards, were often driven by a sense of duty.
A belief that he was acting in the best interests of the empire.
And his contemporaries often saw him as a strong, decisive leader.
To them, ruthlessness might have been a virtue, a necessary quality for a ruler.
It all comes back to perspective, doesn't it?
A 16th century Ottoman would have a very different view than we do now.
And that's the challenge of studying history.
Trying to piece together the past, understanding motivations that are so foreign to us.
It's like a giant puzzle with missing pieces.
So how should we, in the 21st century, view Selim I? Good or bad for the empire?
That's the debate, isn't it? There's no single right answer.
What are the arguments?
On the one hand, his conquests brought wealth, prestige.
He laid the foundation for the Golden Age.
But on the other hand, his reign was incredibly violent.
Thousands died, minorities persecuted.
It's a difficult equation weighing the benefits against the human cost.
Each person has to grapple with that and come to their own conclusions.
I think that's the best we can do, acknowledge the complexities.
He was a man of immense talent, but also capable of terrible things.
It's like a tapestry woven with threads of gold and blood.
You can admire the artistry, but you can't ignore the darkness.
A beautiful way to put it.
So I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
We've just scratched the surface.
Any final insights before we wrap up?
One thing that stands out is Selim's focus on the eastern frontier, his obsession with the Safavids.
But Suleiman shifted focus to the west, towards Europe.
It makes you wonder, if Selim had lived, would he have done the same?
A fascinating what if.
History's full of them.
And that's what makes it so captivating.
It's a constant journey of discovery.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Selim.
It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners who want to learn more,
there are plenty of resources out there.
We've included some in the show notes.
Definitely check them out.
And don't forget to join us next time for another deep dive into history.
We'll be exploring another fascinating figure.
Until then, keep learning, keep exploring.
And keep questioning.
Selim, what a complex figure.
A real study in contrasts.
Yeah, brilliant military strategist, but totally ruthless.
Absolutely.
He really changed the Ottoman Empire.
Expanded its borders, paved the way for Suleiman's golden age.
But his methods were, well, pretty brutal by today's standards.
It's a key point. How do we reconcile these different sides of him?
It's tempting to judge historical figures based on what we believe today.
But it's important to try and understand the context of their time.
Right, like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Exactly.
So how do we even begin to evaluate someone like Selim?
He was a product of his era, a time of constant war.
And political maneuvering.
Right, so does that excuse his brutality?
Not excuse, but maybe helps explain it.
Understanding his motivations, that's key.
Okay, so he inherited an empire with all sorts of problems.
Challenges on all sides.
The Safavids to the east, the Mamluks controlling trade routes.
He saw them as existential threats.
And believed drastic measures were needed.
To ensure the empire's survival, its prosperity.
So he felt a sense of duty, even if his methods seem awful to us.
He believed he was acting in the best interests of his people.
And we have to remember, many saw him as a strong leader.
Decisive, powerful, exactly what they needed.
Ruthlessness might have been seen as a positive back then.
A sign of strength, essential for a ruler in those times.
Again, it's all about perspective.
A 16th century Ottoman would see him differently than we do.
It's a challenge we face with all history, isn't it?
Trying to piece together the past, understand such different mindsets.
It's like a puzzle, but we're missing pieces and don't have the box cover.
A very apt analogy.
So, looking back, how should we view Selim? Good or bad for the empire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
No easy answer, I guess.
There are strong arguments on both sides.
On the one hand, his conquests brought wealth, prestige.
The foundation for the Golden Age.
On the other hand, violence, repression.
Yes, so many lives lost.
It's a tough equation to balance, the good versus the terrible.
Each person has to wrestle with that and decide for themselves.
There's no right or wrong answer, is there?
Not really. Selim's legacy is complex.
Full of both positive and negative aspects.
A man of immense talent, but also capable of horrific acts.
It's like looking at a tapestry with gold threads and threads of blood.
I like that. A beautiful image.
You see the artistry, the skill, but also the darkness woven in.
And perhaps that's the best we can do. Acknowledge those complexities.
Not shy away from the contradictions.
Embrace the full picture of this fascinating and controversial figure.
Well said. I think that gives our listeners a lot to chew on.
As they continue to explore Selim and Ottoman history.
Any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
Just this. History is never truly finished. It's always evolving.
New evidence, new interpretations.
Selim's story is just one part of a much larger ongoing conversation.
And that's what keeps it so interesting, right?
Always something new to discover, to question, to reevaluate.
Well, on that note, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed exploring the life and legacy of Selim.
the Grim
who
Sultan,
left such a lasting impact on the Ottoman Empire.
and on the course of history.
And for those who want to delve deeper,
Check out the resources in the show notes.
we've included some fascinating materials.
Definitely worth a look.
And until next time, keep learning and exploring.
Farewell.
Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.